have a hero without a villain, but sometimes these two opposing forces team up to take down a common foe. These team-ups end up being some of the most hype moments in any series. So here we've made a list of when the anime main character teams up with the villain in no particular order. Starting off this list, we have Gon, Killua, and Hisoka from Hunter x Hunter. Now this is among one of the many odd team-ups on this list, since Hisoka is quite the insane villain. The team-up occurred during the Greed Island arc against Razor, one of the game masters of Greed Island, and the battle in question was a dodgeball match, one of the most hyped dodgeball matches I've ever seen, since our heroes could very well have their lives forfeited. This high-stakes dodgeball match resulted in one of the coolest moments in Hunter x Hunter, as Gon, Killua, and Hisoka braced for Razor's deadly spike ball after the majority of both teams were already down and out for the count. Despite teaming up with an antagonist, the teamwork these guys put on display was a truly fun thing to watch. It definitely wasn't something you'd expect from Hisoka, who's shown sadistic tendencies before, and it was equally surprising to see how in sync they were. In the end, our uncanny team won against all odds. Next, we have Goku and Frieza teaming up to fight against Jiren. Now, fans of the series can't forget the first time they came across Frieza back in Dragon Ball Z, as he served as the strongest villain Goku had ever faced before this. It was iconic not just because of how strong Frieza was, but also because this was the first time Goku turned into a Super Saiyan. The two had a deadly battle in which Goku was victorious, and after all of that, you wouldn't imagine that the two would ever have to team up. Until Dragon Ball Super, that is. During the Tournament of Power, Universe 7 and Universe 11 collided, and Jiren, the most powerful member of the team, proved to be too much for Goku to handle alone. Putting aside their differences for mutual survival, these two fought hard against Jiren, resulting in one of the best battles in Dragon Ball Super, with every fan on the edge of their seats. Goku and Frieza eventually pulled the win against Jiren, albeit by a slim margin, but hey, we still got to see an awesome fight. Inuyashiki and Shishigami slide in on this list against a meteor. During the entirety of the series, these two characters are depicted as being polar opposites in similar circumstances. Both have been turned into androids and crave to feel human again. Inuyashiki does this by saving lives, while Shishigami does this by ending them. At the end of the anime, all attempts to divert the meteor heading to Earth failed, so Inuyashiki had to step up and try to stop it. But even his weaponry isn't enough, as he's unable to stop the meteor. Shishigami shows up as all hope is lost and, in the end, detonates himself to stop the meteor. It did catch everyone off guard, considering how selfless the act was, and to think that Shishigami willingly gave up his life. However, he was unable to stop the meteor by himself, and Inuyashiki had to self-detonate as well. A final team-up marked by the end of both of their lives. Next up, we have Edward and Ling teaming up with Envy to escape Gluttony's stomach. This odd team-up occurred when the three were swallowed up by Gluttony and got trapped inside the infinite realm of his stomach. Truly an endless appetite this homunculus has. Anyway, this was quite an awful situation, since Envy reveals that there isn't actually a way to escape from this. Edward and Ling then end up fighting against the shape-shifting Envy, since what better way to pass the time? Envy ends up swallowing Edward, who finds Envy's Philosopher's Stone at his core. Eventually, they put aside their differences as Edward uses Envy's Philosopher's Stone to open Gluttony's fake Gate of Truth and pass through the doors back into the real world. It was quite the unexpected team-up, because just a few moments ago, these guys were fighting to the death, only to end up working together to open up a portal. The team-up was pretty short-lived, but hey, at least the temporary team-up helped our heroes escape from an infinite stomach dimension. What better drama could there be than watching two friends come to odds before eventually getting back together? Such was the case in Code Geass. Suzaku was the morally straight good guy, while our protagonist slash anti-hero was the mastermind strategist who would do anything to fulfill his goals. Both of them have always had the mutual goal of setting the Japanese people free from Britannia, but their means to do so are just vastly different, which is why the two are always at odds. The two eventually put aside their differences to launch the plan Zero Requiem. The plan was by far one of the best finales around. Lelouch took up all of the world's hatred, becoming a tyrant for the people. With Lelouch framed as the common enemy, Suzaku swooped in while disguised as Zero and landed the final blow, ending Lelouch's life and allowing the world to heal and focus on something other than all of that fighting. The team-up was masterfully executed and allowed both characters to atone for their sins in a way that granted them their mutual goal. We've talked about friends on opposing ends, but now we'll be talking about half-brothers who oppose each other. Sesshomaru started off as a villain in this story, an exceptionally powerful villain who's the older half-brother of Inuyasha. His pride was the reason he was always at odds with Inuyasha, as he felt that he was unworthy of his father's sword. He didn't find Inuyasha worthy because he was a half-demon, half-human hybrid. The turning point would be when another yokai, Naraku, ended up betraying Sesshomaru and even kidnapping Rin, a human Sesshomaru had grown to like. Sesshomaru's pride and anger fueled him against Naraku, while Inuyasha was against the guy because the dude was a villain. This resulted in the awesome team-up where we got to see these two badass brothers fight it out against Naraku, who was at full power after gaining control of the completed Shikon jewel. We were treated to an awesome final battle and sweet team-up that fans of the series wouldn't soon forget. Next up we have Viral helping Team Daiguren from Gurren Lagann. Viral's a shark-type beastman who's constantly at odds with Simon and the gang. During the course of the series, Viral ends up being disillusioned before being arrested by the human military. Simon faces the same fate and the two end up meeting again in prison. When Yoko busts Simon out, Viral is freed as well. Simon convinces Viral to join up with him and he becomes a part of Team Daiguren, taking part in the ultimate battle against the Anti-Spiral. By the final fight against the Anti-Spiral, Viral changes a lot to the point where he's not just helping because he has to, but because he truly cares about Team Daiguren. Turning from a villain to an anti-hero, this final team-up marks the turning point where Viral is now a solid member of the team and part of the gang. It was a pretty wholesome team-up as it showed the character development Viral went through and how even villains can change their ways and redeem themselves. Stepping up next, we have Saber and Gilgamesh working together. This team-up was one of the most unexpected since Gilgamesh's entire personality is extremely arrogant and prideful, especially towards Saber, who he considers little more than a weak woman he can use whenever he wants. Even with all of that, Gilgamesh intervenes during the battle between Saber and Castor's giant monster, whom he created after merging his horde of monsters. The beast is absolutely immense and has some pretty strong regenerative abilities. To defeat the beast, Saber needed to charge up her ultimate attack, but Berserker intended to intervene and stop Saber from attacking. Against all expectations though, Gilgamesh stomps Berserker in his tracks. The assist allowed Saber to incinerate the beast with a noble phantasm, putting an end to Castor's threat. No one would have ever expected Gilgamesh of all people to help Saber out, considering what we know of his personality, which is what made this moment all the more better. Besides, who wouldn't want an assist from one of the strongest guys around? Devastating their way onto the list, we have everyone teaming up against Eren Yeager. During the entire course of the series, our Eldian heroes were constantly at odds with the Marleyans. There wasn't a shortage of characters at odds with one another, as everyone fought everyone at one point or another. There was a lot of resentment and hatred at the ends of both nations, which made up the bulk of Attack on Titan. After such a long-spanning feud, you'd think that there was nothing that could possibly have both sides reconcile, but you'd be wrong. Near the end of the series, Eren, the once protagonist of the series, commits a mass genocide of the world population. This leads to both the Eldians and Marleyans putting aside their differences to stop Eren from making most of the world extinct. The ensuing battle was the largest ever seen in Attack on Titan, as everyone banded together to take out Eren, which led to one of the biggest team-ups we'd ever seen. Fighting against a common enemy, the team-up eventually resulted in the fall of Eren Yeager and an end to the decades of hate harbored between these two different factions. Next up, we have an entry from Naruto where Obito and Kakashi teamed up against Kaguya. Obito was a primary villain during the series and was basically used as a tool by Madara to enact his plans. Towards the end of the war though, Obito turns to Madara after some good old talk no jutsu by Naruto. He realized that he was being used and that Madara was actually the one responsible for Rin's death. Obito would eventually get the chance to redeem himself during the fight against Kaguya when he teamed up with Kakashi, Naruto and Sasuke to take down the overpowered villain. Now this led to a pretty emotional moment when Obito sacrificed his own life by teleporting the attack aimed at Kakashi away from him, in turn letting the attack aimed at him connect. The attack causes his body to crumble, but the team up and save was what eventually led our heroes to overpowering and defeating Kaguya, saving the world in the process.
Kakashi, お前は当分こっちにいろ。すぐに来んじゃねえぞ。
Returning to the Stone Age era, we have Senku and Tsukasa as they team up against Hyuga. These two have been at odds with one another due to a difference in ideals. Tsukasa wants to create a new world without technology, a world filled with young, innocent people who can live in harmony with nature. Senku, on the other hand, is all for technology and wants to restore humanity. It's no wonder they clash considering their inherent differences. However, they put those differences aside when they face off against Hyuga, who had betrayed Tsukasa because he had different plans. The resulting confrontation was an ill-equipped Senku and a wounded Tsukasa against a major threat. Still, the resulting fight was awesome to watch. The team-up even led to Tsukasa recalling his promise to protect Senku, a promise he failed to keep. Overall, it was an excellent team-up because of the fight as well as the motivations that backed each of the characters. Next on the list, we have Atsushi and Akutagawa teaming up to fight against Francis Scott Key Fitzgerald. Strained relationships aside, this team-up occurs after Atsushi shakes off Akutagawa, who wants to take his life, and ends up at the executive office to grab the control terminal. Unfortunately for him, Fitzgerald is the one guarding the terminal. This ends up pretty bad for our hero as Fitzgerald overpowers him and is about to rip off his limbs. Luckily for Atsushi, Akutagawa arrives in the nick of time and ends up getting into a fight with Fitzgerald even though he came for Atsushi. Atsushi eventually joins the fight, escapes with Akutagawa and resolves their conflict. But Fitzgerald shows up again. The fight continues and both Atsushi and Akutagawa give their best. The team-up gave us a spectacular fight filled with some pretty badass moments and displays of power. Despite their differences, the two actually made a pretty solid team and eventually defeated Fitzgerald, albeit by a pretty small margin. Burning away onto our list are Kurono and Karon. Karon, having a strong loyalty to the Evangelist and being a member of the White Clan, was a significant foe to our heroes. Even right before the team-up, Karon and Kurono were engulfed in a pretty serious fight. It wasn't until the appearance of a massive infernal demon that Karon decided to stop fighting with our heroes for a bit, since the destruction would encompass the pillars he was tasked with protecting. After taking on the massive attack by the Infernal, Kurono steps up and takes the chance to dispatch the huge demon quickly and effectively. The team-up was pretty short-lived and between two vastly different characters, but at least both of them were wise enough to put aside their differences to reach a common goal. The team-up was definitely a moment to revisit. Coming up next, we have Ryuko and Satsuki. The two sisters are constantly at odds with one another. During the majority of the first half of the series, Satsuki has been the primary antagonist, constantly clashing with Ryuko, who believes that she was involved with her father's murder. The sister reveal is made later on in the series, and the two eventually reconcile before taking on their mother. The entire family looks pretty dysfunctional, to say the least. In the final battle, the two sisters take on Ragyo on her life fiber airship. The battle is one of the best in the series, and both sisters are completely in sync as they fight against their pretty overpowered mother. The team up ends up being so powerful itself as the two showcase a brilliant display of power and synergy, eventually defeating their mother and saving the day. The animation itself does an awesome job as it's filled to the brim with flashiness that makes the team up awesome to watch. Friends turned rivals turned friends seems to be a recurring theme here as we see Takasugi and Gintoki team up to fight Oboro. In the past, Takasugi and Gintoki were as close could be, being disciples under the same master and the closest of friends. He eventually ends up hating Gintoki because Gintoki chose to kill Shoyo in order to save both Takasugi and Katsura. Takasugi ended up harboring his hate for Gintoki after that, and this resulted in numerous clashes between the two throughout the series. Considering the history the two have been through, the moment we see them fighting on the same side is a moment to behold. Right as Oboro clashes with Gintoki, Takasugi steps into the picture and cuts out his left eye. The fight itself didn't last too long, but the simple fact that the two Shoyo disciples teamed up in the first place was enough to move fans all over. Villains turning over a new leaf is always an interesting theme to come by, isn't it? Just like the earlier entry with Viral joining Team Daiguren, here we have Tsukiyama and Kaneki's relationship. During the gourmet arc, Tsukiyama appears as the primary antagonist and a ruthless ghoul who just loves to eat. He becomes obsessed with Kaneki due to his scent and eventually lures him into a trap at the ghoul restaurant. Kaneki eventually fights and defeats the guy before escaping. Later on, Tsukiyama participates in a rescue mission to get Kaneki back from Umorai. After Kaneki escapes and forms his own group of ghouls, Tsukiyama joins it as well in the hopes of staying close to Kaneki for a chance to devour him. The guy has a pretty insane spectrum on which he works and just wants to eat our hero. Over the course of the series, he loses his original motivation to eat Kaneki and ends up genuinely caring for him, becoming a true comrade in every sense of the word. I guess you could call this one a permanent team up. Up next, we have the team up of Ryuen and Ayano Koji from Classroom of the Elite. Kakeru Ryuen is a class rep and famous delinquent who leads his class through fear, our basic villain premise. Too bad he messed up with our hero, Ayano Koji, since he ended up absolutely pummeling Ryuen, instilling in him the fear he so heavily relied upon to run his class. You'd be hard-pressed to think that they'd team up after this, but hey, common enemies tend to bring together the most unexpected characters. Later on, Ayano Koji prevents Ryuen from getting expelled by having Shiho Manabe take the fall for him, encouraging Ryuen to later assist Ayano Koji with outwitting Saka Yanagi. This was all because Ayano Koji still had use for Ryuen as a pawn, which really shows how he's not a typical hero. Diving further into this list now, we have the team up of Crocodile and Luffy.
Crocodile!
You remember Crocodile as the primary antagonist during the Alabasta arc of the long-running series. Luffy and the guy came at odds with one another, and after a long opposition, Luffy eventually defeated the Warlord of the Sea, which led him to being imprisoned and impaled down in the lowest level. Fast forward to the time of Ace's planned execution, Luffy found himself in the same prison, and after a certain turn of events, Crocodile teamed up with Luffy to escape the maximum security prison. The team-up doesn't stop there either, as after heading over to Marineford during the Paramount War, Crocodile proves to be quite the the help when our hero is fighting against the Marines. You'd think that after escaping the prison, Crocodile wouldn't stick around to help out during the war, but it seems like the team up wasn't as short-lived as we'd come to expect. It was definitely pretty sweet watching the two work together, since we knew how strong Crocodile was and Luffy needed all the allies he could get if he hoped to rescue Ace. This may be the most unique team up on this list because here the good guy doesn't really know that he's teaming up with the villain. L's primary goal during the entirety of Death Note is to uncover the murderer, Kira. During this quest to find the killer, he identifies Light as a suspicious individual and does everything he can to prove that he is in fact Kira. Light, on the other hand, is doing everything he can to avoid having his true identity figured out, leading to one of the best cat and mouse chases around. The team up's still genuine though, as Light hatches the most convoluted plot ever to get L to stop suspecting him. After forcibly letting go of his memories, essentially sealing them, Light truly teams up with L and begins looking for Kira without remembering that it's his own identity. It becomes one of the best team ups around, since these are two of the smartest individuals in the series, and yet it's also the smartest plan Kira launched as he succeeds in eventually getting the upper hand on L. Talk about high IQ moves. The final team up on this list is Andy and Rip from Undead Unluck. Sometimes two factions have to work together against a common enemy, and such was the case when Autumn came along to mess everything up. Rip is a member of Under, a group of negators who hunt down other negators. As such, this group opposes the Union and Rip belongs to this group. Even before Autumn's appearance, the two groups were smack dab in the middle of fighting it out. But then the groups eventually put aside their differences temporarily as Rip and Andy synchronized with each other to earnestly fight off Autumn. The team up was actually able to affect Autumn, even being able to cut a hole in its body straight to the core, which eventually led to Autumn's defeat. Anno's sacrifice, coupled with the teamwork Rip and Andy put on display, certainly made the entire battle a treat to watch. And with that, we're wrapping up this list of when the anime MC teams up with the villain. As always though, do let us know any team-ups you believe should have made it onto this list, and if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and share the video with your friends to see. See you next time.